Attorney generals of the 36 states of the country have sued the federal government over its failure to remit funds into the federal account. In the suit filed before the Supreme Court and marked as SC/CV/395/2021, the 36 Attorney Generals asked the court to declare that by the provisions of Section 162 of 1 and Section 162 of 10 of the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended, all income, returns, proceeds, or receipts, however described, derived from confiscated, forfeited, and or recovered assets constitute revenue of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and must be remitted to the Federation account for the collective benefit of the federal, state, and local governments. They also asked the court to declare that the failure and or refusal of President Muhammadu Buhari, Minister of Finance, and the offices of the Attorney General of the Federation, AGF, and the Accountant General of the Federation, including all other relevant authorities and or agencies of the Federation, to remit the receipts, income, returns, or proceeds derived from all assets recovered, seized, confiscated, and forfeited into the Federation account for distribution in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution is unconstitutional. The plaintiff deposed from 2015 till date. The federal government had secured both international and municipal forfeiture, recovery, and repatriation of stolen assets in the sum of 1,866,906,543,658.73 naira. About 167 properties, 450 cars, 300 trucks and cargoes, and 200,000 barrels of crude oil worth over 450 million naira, and had failed to remit same as required by the Constitution. The plaintiff alleged that instead of paying the cash into the Federation account, the federal government illegally divided it into the Consolidated Revenue Account, CRA, and other accounts not recognized by the Nigerian Constitution. Director General, Nigerian Governors Forum, NGF, Ashinshana Okaru, who disposed to the affidavit on behalf of the plaintiff, said the funds in the CRA strictly belong to the federal government and specific states are not distributable among the federating units. They are therefore asking for the remittance of 1.8 trillion naira in cash and 450 billion naira non-cash in recovered loot since 2015 into the Federation account. They are also seeking for a detailed account of the recovered assets not remitted into the Federation account by President Buhari, as well as all the relevant officials and agencies of government. They also want the Apex Court to compel the federal government through the Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission, RMFAC, to design the modalities for distributing recovered assets among the federating units. The suit accuses President Buhari of various constitutional breaches in his handling of the forfeited assets. Meanwhile, Nigeria's Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice ABUBAKAR Malami has reacted to the lawsuit filed by the 36 state Attorney Generals over the government's failure to remit funds into the federal account. According to a statement signed by his media aide Umar Gwandu, the Attorney General of the Federation argued that international recoveries are governed by conflict of laws, principles, and not local legislation given multiple sovereignties involved, Politics Nigeria reports. It said international recoveries are more or less governed by international conventions, negotiations, and agreements of parties. It is never a straitjacket application of local legislation. Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission Act has nothing specific on funds recovered from indicted public officers. It merely mentions accrual and disbursement of revenue from the Federation account. So, questions of recovery of stolen funds from the indicted public officers are appropriately dealt with by other relevant laws. It is therefore misleading to give the impression that such recoveries and usage of stolen funds and stashed abroad are provided for by the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission Act. One cannot situate rights and entitlements on looted funds and recovered assets with myopic and narrow understanding of concepts of the application of local legislation. For the avoidance of doubt and the purpose of setting the record straight, the application of the looted funds can only be factored within the context of the mutual understanding and negotiations of international and multifaceted jurisdictional and territorial legislative issues. The recovery of stolen assets and the subsequent uses of which these funds may be employed are subject to international agreements between Nigeria and the affected countries, thereby bringing the conflict of laws into contemplation. The statement continued. Importantly also, these repatriated funds are based on cooperation and mutual assistance agreements, especially the United Nations Convention Against Corruption and implementation of the Global Forum on Asset Recovery, GFAR, principles on the repatriation of stolen assets. The African Union and the ECOWAS protocols of recovery of illicit funds are equally relevant when it comes to the role of Nigeria in relation to its other partners. As a member of the Committee of Nations and a respectable international partner, Nigeria must always strive to fulfill its international commitment in the repatriation and use of stolen funds and assets. By way of example, the federal government of Nigeria has entered into numerous agreements such as the one with the United States and the island of Jersey in 2020, and including with other countries around the world where the agreement assume an international character. The specifics of the agreement often dictate the trajectory of recovery, sharing, transfer, and implementation. Some elements misunderstood the issue of international recoveries and locally generated funds in relation to monies belonging to the federal government and are locally generated. It is not to be confused with stolen funds, an asset domiciled in foreign jurisdiction whose recovery and subsequent repatriation are based on international legal arrangements between the Federal Republic of Nigeria and the foreign custodian of these funds. It needs to be further noted that even recoveries of the local assets are in most cases regulated by the applicable legislation and judicial pronouncement associated with this legislation and not Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission Act exclusively. One can cite the purpose for clarity, recoveries done by the NDLEA, EFCC, ICPC, among others.